plug. I'll sort of, oh, guys, we are live. All right.
Oh,
Well, hello, book lovers, and welcome to Authors Love Bookstores, presented by A Mighty Blaze. I'm Joe Moldover, author of the novel Every Moment After, and I am your host for today. A Mighty Blaze is a volunteer effort of writers and creatives who love books and storytelling and authors and bookstores. We work to bring attention to these essential parts of our culture during COVID-19 and beyond. Authors Love Bookstores is a weekly online program held on Wednesdays. I host and produce in conjunction with fellow writer Kimberly Hensel-Lawrence. Our goal is to highlight indie bookstores across the US and Canada, to tell you what makes them so special and what you can do to support their continued survival. We do this by speaking with booksellers and with the authors who love and appreciate their stores. If you're watching live with us on Facebook, please feel free to post a question via comment below, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. And so, without further ado, today I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Lev Grossman. If you have been in a bookstore in the last 10 years, you know that Lev Grossman is the author of the Magicians trilogy. The Magicians was published in 2009 and was a New York Times bestseller and one of the New Yorker's best books of the year. The sequel, The Magician King, came out in 2011 and was also a Times bestseller. The third Magician's book, The Magician's Land, was published in 2014 and true to form, debuted at #1. It was also a Times Notable Book of the Year. The Magician's books have now been published in 25 countries and adapted as a TV show that ran for 5 seasons. His newest book, The Silver Arrow, a novel for children, there it is, was published in September. And in his spare time, he's also developing a TV series called The Heavens, and wrote a movie called The Map of Tiny Perfect Things, which is in post-production. Lev was formerly the lead technology writer and the book critic at Time magazine for 15 years, and the New York Times described him as among this country's smartest and most reliable critics. Whew. Welcome, Lev.
thank you. Thank you.
I feel like I've run out of time now that I've gone through your bio. I am also delighted to welcome one of Lev's favorite independent booksellers. We have Jessica Begnulo, am I saying it right? Thank you. From Greenlight Books in Brooklyn. Welcome, Jessica. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Jessica, we want to turn to you first. I have had the pleasure of visiting your store, but for people who have not, we want to paint a little bit of a picture. So can you just tell us a little bit about Greenlight and the community that you serve?
Sure. Joe, you've not only been a shopper, you've actually been an author presenting in our store. We were just talking about that great event last year. So Greenlight Bookstore was founded almost 11 years ago now. We now have 2 locations. So one of them is located in the neighborhood of Fort Greene, and one of them is in a neighborhood some people call Flatbush, some people call Prospect Lefferts Gardens, that's a little further east, close to the Prospect Park. Both of them are in Brooklyn, and they're both very much neighborhood bookstores. They take a lot from their surrounding area. We take cues from our customers about the kind of books that we carry. The one that's Lev's local bookstore is the Fort Greene store on Fulton Street. And that's our first location, and it has sort of succeeded beyond all of our expectations when we opened it in 2009. It's near a transit hub. It's in a neighborhood with a lot of writers and readers who live right there in the neighborhood. And the community has been incredibly supportive of us. We actually opened with some help from some local organizations who were actively seeking to bring a bookstore to that neighborhood. And that has been consistent, the neighborhood support the entire time we're there. So, you know, it's a diverse neighborhood, like ethnically, economically, you know, families, young people, like kind of all the whole spectrum of human experience. And that's kind of what we love about it. So, and we're open for shopping again after having been entirely shut down earlier this year because of COVID. We're now very carefully welcoming people back into the store. So it's wonderful to sort of be there for our community again.
That's fantastic. Now, you said that Greenlight was founded in 2009, but you had years of experience before that as a bookseller. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what you love about being a bookseller.
Yeah, I was really lucky. I went to NYU and I thought I would maybe be a writer or something like that vaguely because I was a person who liked books. And I had a really wonderful writing teacher who was leaving her job in a little bookstore because she needed to finish her master's thesis. And she's like, do you need a job? Do you want to work at this bookstore? And I was like, yeah, I guess so. And ended up working at this amazing store called Three Lives and Company in Manhattan, which I still think is one of the best bookstores in the entire world, and fell in love with it. Tried to work in publishing for a little while and was like, I hate working an office job and all I want to do is be in the bookstore. So I went back and worked there and eventually was like, how do I turn this into a career? And so started working on plans to open my own store. So I worked in a number of different New York City bookstores, and eventually wrote a business plan with a lot of help from the Brooklyn Public Library and from the American Booksellers Association. Found a business partner, Rebecca Fitting, who we're still working together, and with a lot of support from the Fort Greene neighborhood, opened the store. So yeah, that's the trajectory in 10 seconds.
That's great. We love Three Lives. When we had Julia Glass on, she brought Three Lives on with her. So
Yes.
that's a fabulous bookstore.
The best. That's still home. That's still my bookstore home in some ways.
That's great. So if you've been to one independent bookstore, then you've been to one independent bookstore. They're all different and they all have something unique. Can you tell us something that you feel is kind of special or unique, or that sort of sets Greenlight apart as an indie?
Yeah, I know that's hard and easy at the same time. Yeah, I mean, every bookstore is a reflection of its neighborhood, and I think, you know, our neighborhood has always been like a historically Black and historically sort of mixed and integrated neighborhood, and that's a big part of what we do. Hosting and highlighting authors of color is really, really important to us, in both, you know, the books that we have on display and the authors that we host for events. Architecturally, we're kind of unique. We're in this old tenement building that has like an air shaft, like just in the middle of a building that makes it kind of like a donut hole. So we've had to figure out how to like make that into a display because it's a weird shape. And I don't know if this is the right place to bring this up, but we're excited to be one of only a couple of bookstores nationwide who are taking part in a campaign starting today. So this is a very good timing, called Boxed Out. And it's a project in partnership with a marketing firm called DCX, where we plaster the windows of the bookstore with messages on cardboard about how terrible it is to shop at Amazon. So it's a really interesting display. And if you go on our social media on Greenlight BKLYN, you can see a lot of pictures there. If you look at the hashtag Boxed Out. So that's a unique thing that happened today. I was at the bookstore this morning at 7 a.m. helping to supervise putting up that installation. So that's not what we usually look like, but it's kind of a special day.
Oh, I love it. That's so great. Yeah. We will link to that in the chat for the viewing audience to check that out. That's great.
Yeah.
I love to ask booksellers about events, because that's so much a part of what makes independent bookstores vibrant. And I love the event that I did with you guys when I was on tour last year. That was probably the biggest, most energetic event that my mother did not attend. It was great. It's such a great community and such a great store. Tell us a little about events, what it takes to put on a good one. And I don't know if there's one that you have found especially interesting or surprising or possibly horrible, or
we have very few horrible events, which is
it's just the three of us, you can tell.
Yeah. I mean, we host when we were hosting author events in the store, which to be honest, we have not been doing since March. We host, 2 or 3 or 4 events every week, plus story time, plus book groups. That's just author events. So there's always something going on. And I think the ones I like most are the ones that turn into parties, that spill out onto the sidewalk. So we have a couple of big events a year, like the Brooklyn Indie Party, or our anniversary party, that just turn into a big sort of like book lovers sort of like finding each other and drinking a lot of cheap wine. If this isn't too pandering, Lev Grossman's event for the last book in the Magician's trilogy was one that we held at St. Joseph's College. We have a couple of good offsite partner venues that we work with. And he brought together a whole bunch of fellow sort of fantasy writers to have this amazing conversation. It was a packed house. We did a trivia game where we gave away break bills paraphernalia, which was really, really fun. So I love those big offsite events where books become this sort of theatrical performative experience, like collective experience, that everyone's having this like moment, this day where it's all about this book. So that was really special.
That was too pandering, Jessica. I'm sorry, I can't accept that.
I can't accept whatever.
We'll edit it out. We'll edit it away.
Yeah. I mean, and recently we've been sort of exploring the possibilities of virtual events, and we've been doing lots and lots of online conversations with authors and editors. And one of the most interesting, I mean, I think maybe like the crowning jewel so far of our virtual events was, we called it the all-star review and reopening party. So when we were about to open our doors to the public, we sort of tapped all of our favorite big celebrity writers, and Lev was one of them. Ta-Nehisi Coates, Jennifer Egan, lots of authors that we had worked with before. And we just did a big, each of them read for 5 minutes on whatever they wanted. And
I have to say, that may be the only Zoom event I've ever participated in, present company accepted, that I have actually enjoyed. It was just, it was very warm. Everybody knew why they were there and was happy to be there.
It was so amazing. I mean, it was a ticketed event. So it was a fundraiser for the store. It was kind of like a rent party. So it was, everyone who was there to support the store, and with just this amazing stable of authors, I was just like in awe, in all different genres. And they all were so had so much good to say about each other. And they all read such interesting things. Yeah, that was one of the highlights for sure.
Because of the pandemic, a lot of us hadn't seen each other or any other writers at all, for months on end. So it was it felt like a big reunion, getting the band back together.
I think there's a lot going on with private chats in that event that I don't even know about.
All good things.
I love it. That's great. Jessica, you're putting things up online. I don't know if that event is online, but I know that you have a lot of content online. People can go, we'll put it in the chat, but people can go through the website to look at your videos, right?
Yeah, we have a YouTube channel. If you look for Greenlight Bookstore, we're on there. So Lev's Event for Silver Sparrow is on there. The All-Star Review is on there. And yeah, we've never tried video recording when we were in the store. We just sort of weren't set up for it AV wise, but with Zoom, it's very easy to record those conversations, and then they can kind of live on, which is neat.
Yeah. So for the online audience, that will be in the chat, and you can go and check that out. Lev, let me turn to you. We are getting questions from your online fans, but before I start to pitch those in your direction, we are here because you nominated Greenlight as your beloved local indie. And I wonder if you'll just tell us a little bit about what you love about this store and what makes it so special.
Sure. Greenlight opened, I had come to the neighborhood probably 6 months before Greenlight opened. And, when you come to a new neighborhood, you often feel like a little bit lost, or I don't know anybody, or what is this place in which I suddenly find myself? And it's amazing what the presence of a bookstore does for a neighborhood. It's almost as if there's this electric field that it generates or something, because suddenly, from a bunch of people just randomly walking on a sidewalk, you can see all the readers, and you can see all the people who love books. They become visible. It's a little bit like Pokemon Go, which is a strange analogy, I know. But you can see them. You can see the other people who love books because they're going in and out of the bookstore. And suddenly you realize, oh, I'm part of a community of other people who love the same thing that I love. It was a really joyful, special thing. And I will say, Jessica touched on this earlier, I love the shape of Greenlight. I don't know, there's probably a geometrical term for that shape. It has about 14 sides. It just sort of is this wonderful sort of zone that you are sort of inside. And it's not like anywhere else. There's a lot of things that I love about it, but I guess those are the big ones.
I love it. Do you attend events at the store, obviously other apart from your own? And do you have any particular memories of being at the store, either an event or a book that you picked up there that kind of stick in your mind?
Oh gosh, I mean, so many. I've done events there. I've interviewed other authors there. There was a great one for H is for Hawk. Is that Helen McDonald? Am I getting her name right? Which was just one of those events where you admire the other writer so much that you just can hardly stay in your chair. It was so wonderful. There was a great one for Evan Narcisse, who wrote a Black Panther comic. I mean, people come out for that, and they just you just feel the love like a lot, for big books and small books. There's always people there. I am often wandering around the neighborhood, and I'll just walk by. I won't even go to the event, but you'll see all the people inside, and it's just so warm. And there's all these people there, and there's like a little chalk thing saying what's going on. And you just stand and you kind of feel the energy for a bit. It's a good feeling.
That's great. Jessica, question for you. I'm going to merge actually a couple of questions because it's basically about book recommendations.
Sure.
So what has Greenlight been selling during the pandemic, and I guess especially now? And also, what have you been reading, and what do you recommend?
Oh my gosh. So how much time do you have? I mean, one of the most amazing things about the pandemic as a bookstore was the incredible moment when the protests the around Black Lives Matter started to really just sort of peak. And that turned into an incredible interest in anti-racism books. And it turned into people coming to independent bookstores, a lot to Black-owned bookstores, which was fantastic, but to independent bookstores overall. And our website was overwhelmed by orders for, I mean, there's sort of like a top 10 or something, but it was a long tail of tons of really fantastic anti-racist literature. So that was, I mean, that honestly, it was a little bit overwhelming. We were sort of scrambling to meet that demand, and that was amazing. And I mean, they're all books that we've always sold in the store. It's like, it's The New Jim Crow and Me and White Supremacy and Ibram X. Kendi's book and How to Be Anti-Racist, and all of those really amazing titles. But it's been so great to see people really digging in and seeing where books can take them in terms of moving anti-racism forward. So that's been really, really cool. In general, it's interesting. I feel like before the pandemic, we were seeing just tons of nonfiction sales. And we were like, well, it's because people are trying to make sense of the crazy world. And I feel like in the pandemic, people have turned back towards fiction a little bit because you need some like escape or comfort. Like you're just like anywhere but here, any world but this one. So there's been a lot of great fiction sales. I pulled up our bestsellers for this week and I was like, yes, I know exactly why each of those books is selling. Rumaan Alam's Leave the World Behind is a contemporary novel, and he happens to be our neighbor author also in close to the Flatbush store. Tana French's newest mystery, Raven Leilani is a fantastic book about a young Black woman, sort of flaneur almost. The new Elena Ferrante, The Lang Life of Adults. Yeah, Jesse's book, Transcendent Kingdom, which we also had a fantastic event for, and that's one of my favorite books that I've read this season. Britt Bennett's book, The Vanishing Half. Some kids books by Oliver Jeffers, by Katie Yamasaki. So there's lots of great stuff on the bestseller list. For me, I have like my most recent recommendation that I'm kind of obsessed with is a book called Fly Away by an author named Kathleen Jennings. I feel like this is your kind of book, Lev. You might like this one if you haven't read it already, but it's sort of an Australian Gothic fairy tale set in a small town in the bush. And there's a young woman who sort of doesn't quite remember who she is or what happened to her family, but there's all of these local legends of transformations and mysterious beasts, and they sort of become intertwined with her own family history in a really, really creepy and satisfying way. So that one's really fun. Yeah, so I'm certainly into the escapist fiction stuff myself as well. That's my most recent one.
I love it. We'll get as many of those as possible in the chat.
And one of the great things about being Lev Grossman's local bookstore is that he recommends books to you. So one of my favorite books of last year was Lee Bardugo's The Ninth House, because Lev happened to stop by for a signing and he's like, have you read this book? And I was like, no, but I'm reading it now. And it was a fantastic book about magic set at Yale, in the secret societies at Yale. And it was just so creepy and awesome. So,
Oh, that sounds so good.
Yeah.
I was proud to be an early adopter for that book.
Yeah.
Lev, tell us more. Give us more recommendations. What are you reading now, and what are you recommending?
Gosh, I read. Let's see. I'll just do it quickly. Piranesi, Susanna Clarke, her first novel since Jonathan Stranger and Mr. Norrell, something like 16 years ago. And it's worth waiting 16 years for it. It's just so indescribably amazing. The new translation of Beowulf, I would not have expected a year ago to be flogging a new translation of Beowulf by Maria Headley. But it just, I've never experienced that poem as if it were a living poem. But from the very first word, which is bro. Just exclamation point. Bro, tell me we still know how to talk about kings. It's like I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's just it casts a spell. Let's see. Uh, uh, Joe Abercrombie, I think, has a new book called, what is it called? The Trouble with Peace. I might be mistitling it, but Joe Abercrombie is a personal favorite of mine. A
Trouble
British
with
writer.
Peace, you got it.
Yeah, it's the second book of a trilogy. And how is he not bigger? He is just so astonishing. This guy. I can remember talking about him with George R. R. Martin, and George R. R. Martin is like a huge Joe Abercrombie fan, and we were just like, this guy, it gets better with every book. He's just amazing.
And Jessica, I just want to remind the online audience, they can go to the Greenlight website and pick up these books, which we are putting into our Facebook feed right now, correct? You can do online shopping?
Yeah, absolutely. You can shop for almost any book in print on our website. And if you want, you can choose to pick it up in the store. We'll let you know when it arrives and you can just stop by and grab it. We also have some signed copies of this book, if anyone's looking for The Silver Arrow, which I was just saying, I just managed to wrestle away from my 8-year-old daughter. And it's so satisfying and so good. I should have mentioned this among the good escapist fiction that I'm reading right now. I'm not ashamed to read middle grade fiction, but it's sort of everything that you want for like a cozy winter night.
No, there's no shame in that.
So everybody needs to click those links and head to the Greenlight website to pick those up. Lev, I want to let the audience have their crack at you with some questions. So let's see. Well, the first one, which I'm sure you've had before, is what are your thoughts and opinions on the TV show?
I have thoughts, opinions. I have feelings. My feelings are very good. My thoughts are complex because the TV show. I sort of naively, when it started getting underway, I thought, oh, well, they'll just go through my book chapter by chapter, and they'll shoot all the scenes, and characters will say what they say in the books, and then we'll call it a day. Not like that at all. It is very much a re-envisioning of this same story and these characters, and the characters translate very exactly from the book into the show, but they go a lot of places that the book doesn't get to, which at first freaked me out, and then very quickly I became a huge fan of it.
That's great. Yeah, you and a lot of other people. That's fabulous. Another question about your new book, The Silver Arrow. Which is, what was it like to write for a younger audience? The question says that what was it like to write a YA book? I think it's actually middle grade rather than YA maybe, but
Yeah.
What was it like in general to write for a younger audience?
Well, it was fun. I would not have written it if it were not fun. So, I mean, something that, you don't necessarily perceive if you've read The Magicians, which is about people in their 20s drinking too much and making bad decisions. I am actually not a drunk 20-something. I am a dad, and I spend a lot of time being a father to my kids, of which there are 3, and telling them stories. So this telling stories to kids kind of voice was one that came very natural to me because I just have been telling stories to my kids a lot. And I have always had this powerful love of books in that particular age group, not young adult, not where no one's discovering their sexuality here. They are simply, they are just having incredible adventures, which are wonderful and yet ever so slightly bittersweet in the kind of Roald Dahl, E.B. White, Enid Blyton kind of world. It just, I read those books aloud to my kids so many times that I started to have ideas, and it felt really good to get them out there. And I will say, you remember that kids are incredibly smart, and there's not any dumbing down that happens when you write for the kids. You sort of forget, kids don't know everything that adults know, but they are equally as smart as adults. So you actually don't have to kind of take it down a level. And also they are small, but they have big adult-sized emotions as well. They have the same emotions that grown-ups do. They come out in this sort of raw, unprocessed way, but it was less different than I expected it to be from writing for adults.
Except that you use the word blaze instead of cursing, which I thought you guys would find interesting in A Mighty Blaze. There's lots of blazes.
I'm trying to bring blaze back, as just an
Yeah,
expletive, because that was just what I had available to me.
I love it.
In the great genre.
I love it. You mentioned a couple of classic authors for young people. Making that transition, are there contemporary middle grade or young adult authors who you kind of especially admire, or who you sort of inspired you?
Yeah, totally. Gosh, I'm unprepared for this question. The War That Saved My Life. Who wrote that book? It's a contemporary book, and I'm forgetting the author's name. But it is about being in Britain in World War II and escaping from London to Cornwall, and how this terrible catastrophe becomes incredibly liberating for this young girl. My mom is English, and she lived through the Blitz on Britain, and that it really brought back to my kids my mother's story and what she experienced. It's astounding. And there's a sequel, The War I Finally Won. Both books are just so terrific. At a different end of the spectrum, I'm quite a fan of Stuart Gibbs and his Spy School series. They are not dark and heartbreaking, but they are richly entertaining. I do recommend Stuart Gibbs. My kids have been enjoying him a lot. They also are enjoying Wimpy Kid, but I don't have to recommend Wimpy Kid because everybody knows about that already.
Kimberly Bradley is the author of
Kimberly Bradley. I can't recommend those books enough.
It's fantastic. We are going to start to run low on time. Jessica, I wanted to come back to you because before we went on air, we were talking a little bit about some of the information, some of the encouragement that we're trying to give the reading public about book buying and book selling as we're going into the holiday season.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that's going to be really important for keeping all of our local independent bookstores with us going into 2021. There's been enough bad things about 2020 so far without losing any more of our indies. Can you say a little bit more about that? Tell us what the audience needs to know.
Sure. We were talking a little bit about this campaign that a number of indies are working on called October is the New December. And the idea is that things are going to take a little bit longer this year because everything takes longer with social distancing and with all of the things that go along with it. So if you want to buy your holiday gifts early, that's a great idea. And if you order now, your indie bookstore can probably get you any book that you have in mind. So start thinking about it now. We're putting out recommendations and book lists and all of that good stuff right now rather than after Thanksgiving, so that people have time to get all of the things that they want. And yeah, we have sort of more options than ever for shopping. You can shop in the store, you can have things shipped to you or delivered to you, you can pick it up curbside, depending on how you prefer. And we're using our website more than ever at greenlightbookstore.com again, but we're putting lots and lots of sort of browsing options on there. So it's a little more like, although never exactly like, the experience of coming into the bookstore and sort of seeing what we've got out on the table and what we're recommending. So
that's great. That's so important. Lev, I'm going to route one last question over to you, which is, what can we expect from you next?
Well,
you can take a pass, I guess.
No, I mean, you mentioned this movie. Astoundingly to me, I wrote a movie, which is a kind of, it's a young adult comedy about two teenagers who talk too much, and they're stuck in a time loop. That is shot and in post-production and will be released. That it will be released in the spring, and I can't say where it's going to be released, but it starts with an A and it ends with an N. I'm really sorry that it's going to be released on that platform, but it just is. I don't make those decisions.
I was thinking like Arlington, Abington.
Yeah, it's called The Map of Tiny Perfect Things, and it's very exciting to me what that will turn out like. I wrote the story and the screenplay. I haven't seen the movie yet, so that should be exciting. I'm finishing up the pilot script of this TV show called The Heavens, which I'm doing with the Russo brothers, the guys who did the Avengers movies and Captain America. And that's fun. And I am closing in on the end of a novel about King Arthur, which has taken me so long.
Oh
I
my gosh,
can't
you've been
even.
talking about that for forever. I'm
It's
so
so.
excited to see that book.
My family, King Arthur. I'm not allowed to say the words King Arthur in my house any longer because I've been working on this book for for 6 years, and everyone's tired of it. But me, I still love it, and it's almost done.
I want to ask you. I get a question since I've been here for half an hour, so I feel like I have the right to pitch one. But I think more than probably more than any other author we've interviewed, you have just moved across media, right? So you're a novelist. You've been in magazine journalism. You've done TV. You've been involved with TV and with feature films. And I guess my question is, what is it like to move between those media? Do you feel like you're just sort of doing the same work and it's being filtered through different lenses? Or are you doing sort of fundamentally different creative work depending on the medium that you're working in? Does that make sense?
I mean, it all comes from the same place. You're telling stories. It's what you want to do. But but everything else is very different. I talk a good game as if I kind of slip effortlessly between from one medium to another, intuitively grasping the conventions and rules. Screenwriting is so hard. Oh my God, to write this innocent teenage comedy, which based on a short story of my own, which I am adapting. It took me 2.5 years to write this screenplay because the rules turn out to be so different from novels. The story is shaped differently. You can't say what everybody's thinking because that's not how movies work. People just have to intuit from what they say and how they look, what they're thinking and feeling. The technicalities of it are so fundamentally different, and it felt for a long time very awkward trying to do this. And then it was awkward all over again trying to write a TV show, which it turns out is not actually the same as movies. So. I find it fascinating to challenge myself in this way. It also helps me. Because I had a full-time job for most of my writing career, and so writing a single novel all day long is sort of not possible for me. I need to jump between different projects, and so it is helpful for me to work on one thing while the other well kind of refills itself. It's a strange, funny thing to do, which I do in part because it's hard and interesting. And yeah, some things, I'm writing this TV show I'm doing is a space opera. I yield to no one in my love of the novelizations of the Star Wars movies and the extended universe, but there is something fantastic about seeing a space opera on screen. And when I thought of the story, I just wanted to see it. I wanted to feel a subsonic rumble while I was watching these things happen. And there's only one medium that really does that.
Oh, that's fascinating. There's so much to look forward to. I love it. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to speak with me today. It's been a true pleasure to speak with you both. I want to remind our online audience, people watching live, as well as future people who are watching this video, that you need to be going to greenlightbookstore.com, if I'm getting that right. Greenlightbookstore.com to pick up books for the holiday season, including Lev Grossman's latest, The Silver Arrow, which we have some autographed copies available. If you have wandered through the last decade without encountering the magicians, it is not too late. And Jessica, thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for being here with us today.
Thank you, Joe. We appreciate it.
Lev Grossman, thank you so much for being here today and for nominating Greenlight and for sharing your time.
It was truly a pleasure. Thank you both so much.
And to the audience, join us here next Wednesday for more of A Mighty Blaze's Authors Love Bookstores. Until then, stay healthy and, of course, keep reading.